You were told to put the cup down. Sometime after 70, a doctor, a family member, or a magazine told you coffee was a risk you could no longer afford. Your heart, your blood pressure, your sleep. I heard the same thing. I believed it for a while, then I started reading the actual studies, and what I found turned the warning completely upside down. Because the newest heart research does not say older people should quit coffee, it says the opposite. And buried in a study published in January of 2025, there is one small detail about coffee that most doctors never mention, a detail about when you drink it that changes everything. It costs nothing. You already own everything you need. Stay with me because the trail I followed starts with a lie I almost swallowed. It began at my sister's kitchen table. She is 73. She had just come back from a checkup, and she slid her coffee maker across the counter toward me and said, "Take it, I'm not allowed anymore." The doctor scared her off it. No real explanation, just a warning and a shrug. And something about that shrug bothered me, because when I asked what the actual risk was, nobody could tell me a number. Not her, not the pamphlet she brought home. Nobody. So I did what I always do when a warning has no number behind it. I went looking for one. The first thing I learned is that the fear of coffee and the heart is old. Much older than most people think. Back in the 1960s and 70s, doctors genuinely believed coffee strained the heart. It made sense on the surface. Caffeine speeds the pulse. A racing heart feels dangerous. So the advice hardened into common sense, and common sense is the hardest thing in the world to correct. But here is what caught my attention. The moment researchers started actually following coffee drinkers over decades, instead of just guessing, the numbers refused to cooperate with the warning. Take the Framingham Heart Study, which began in 1948 in a small town in Massachusetts and has tracked people's hearts for more than 70 years. It is one of the most respected long-term heart studies ever run. And when researchers combed through that data and studies like it, looking for the damage coffee was supposed to cause, they kept coming up empty. The heart attacks they expected simply were not there in the numbers. That confused me. If coffee was so dangerous, where were the bodies? Where was the wave of harm in people who drank it every single day for 50 years? So I dug into the largest, most modern data sets I could find, and that is where the story stopped being confusing and started being infuriating. In 2022, a team published a study in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology. They used the UK Biobank, a massive medical database following roughly 500,000 adults. They tracked coffee drinkers for more than 10 years and compared them to people who drank none at all. The people who drank 2 to 3 cups a day did not die sooner, they died later. Their risk of dying from any cause over that period was lower by about 10 to 15% compared to the people who drank no coffee. Their risk of heart disease was lower too. And their risk of a dangerous heart rhythm problem, the very thing coffee was blamed for, was lower as well. Read that again slowly. The people drinking coffee had fewer heart rhythm problems, not more. The exact fear that made my sister surrender her coffee maker was pointing in the wrong direction. And this was not one lonely study waving its arms. A review pulling together data on more than 1 million people found the same shape again and again. Moderate coffee drinkers, somewhere around 3 cups a day, tended to live longer than non-drinkers. Not by a little. By enough to matter across a whole population. Now I want to be honest, because I promised myself I would not become the very thing I was hunting. Someone making claims without numbers. Correlation is not the same as proof. These studies follow people. They do not lock them in a lab. But when study after study, on hundreds of thousands of people, on different continents, all lean the same direction, you stop being able to wave it away as coincidence. So the question flipped in my head. It was no longer, is coffee dangerous? It was, why was I ever told it was? But before I could chase that, I hit a wall. Because a few studies did show something worrying. Some coffee drinkers had higher cholesterol, and that little crack in the story is where the whole thing cracked wide open. Here is the clue that stopped me cold. The studies that showed rising cholesterol and the studies that showed protection were both looking at coffee. Same drink, same bean, opposite results. That should be impossible, unless the coffee in one study was not being made the same way as the coffee in the other. So I chased that thread, and it led me to Scandinavia. In parts of Norway and Sweden, there is an old tradition of boiled coffee. You take coarse grounds, you put them straight in hot water, you let it steep, and you pour. No paper filter. It is the way coffee was made for generations, sitting on a stove, thick and strong. My own grandmother made coffee something like this. Grounds in the pot, poured through nothing but habit. Researchers in Norway noticed something strange about heavy boiled coffee regions. The cholesterol numbers ran high, so they started pulling coffee apart, compound by compound, to find the culprit. They found it. Two oily substances naturally present in coffee beans, called kaffestol and kahuol. These oils raise LDL cholesterol, the kind you do not want climbing. And when you brew coffee by letting the grounds sit loose in the water, those oils pour right into your cup. But here is the part that made me set down my notes and just stare at the wall for a minute. A paper filter catches them. That thin little disc of paper traps almost all of the kaffestol and leaves it behind in the grounds. The coffee that pours through carries the flavor and the caffeine and the beneficial compounds, but leaves the cholesterol-raising oils trapped in the paper. So the difference between coffee that raises your cholesterol and coffee that does not was never really about the coffee. It was about the filter. And this is the part of the trail built for anyone who is thinking, this is fine for other people, but I am on a fixed income, I have a small kitchen, I cannot go buy some special machine. Good, because you do not need to buy a single thing you do not already have. This is the piece you can use tomorrow morning. If you use a drip coffee maker with a paper filter, you are already protected. If you use a French press, where you push the grounds down with a plunger, you are drinking the unfiltered kind, and those oils are going straight into your cup. Same with percolators and that old boiled method. The fix costs almost nothing. You can set a plain paper filter inside your French press, or pour your brewed coffee through a paper filter into a second cup before you drink it. That one sheet of paper is the difference. There was a large study out of Norway, led by a researcher named Dag Thelle, following more than 500,000 people for around 20 years. When they separated filtered from unfiltered drinkers, the filtered coffee drinkers actually had lower death rates than people who drank no coffee at all. The unfiltered drinkers did not get that same clean benefit. Same bean, different piece of paper, different outcome. I remember sitting there thinking about every older person who quit coffee entirely because a number on a cholesterol test scared them, when all they may have needed to do was change how they brewed it. Nobody told them about the filter. They gave up something they loved, something that may have been helping them, over a fix that costs a fraction of a penny per cup. And that made me angry enough to keep digging, because by now a bigger question was pressing on me. If the science has been piling up for years that moderate coffee is fine, even good, for most older hearts, then why is the warning still everywhere? Why did my sister get a shrug instead of a filter? That is where the trail turned dark. The fear did not come from nowhere, and it did not stay alive by accident. Part of it is simple momentum. A warning that took hold in the 1960s becomes what doctors were taught, and what those doctors teach the next ones, long after the evidence moves on. Medicine is slow to unlearn. It took decades for the old anti-coffee advice to even begin softening in official guidance. But there is another layer, and this one is about money. Think about who benefits when an older person becomes afraid of a simple, cheap, homemade drink. A cup of coffee brewed at home costs you pennies. It asks nothing of anyone. There is no subscription, no specialist, no monthly refill. Now think about what people are steered toward instead. Expensive supplements that promise heart health, special drinks, pills, programs. An entire industry that thrives when you distrust the plain, cheap thing in your own kitchen and reach for the packaged, marked up thing on a shelf instead. And that is the part that keeps me up at night, dear. One thin sheet of paper stood between my sister and 40 years of needless worry, and nobody handed it to her. That is exactly why I sat down and wrote 3 books of my own, over 550 pages of the same kind of digging you are watching me do right now. Except there I have the room to take you all the way through it. Real cases, the lab markers to ask about, the quiet deficiencies that hide for years, and the plain kitchen fixes that close them, so you can read your own body's signals instead of waiting 12 minutes in a doctor's office for someone else to guess. You will know what to look at, what to ask, and what to change tomorrow morning. Scan the QR code right there on your screen, link in the description, pinned comment, the collection is waiting for you. Now, I did not stop at the filter, because a number that size in a Norwegian study deserved a closer look. I am not going to tell you there is one shadowy room where they decided to scare grandmothers off coffee. The truth is quieter, and honestly, worse. It is 1,000 small incentives, all pointing the same way. Nobody makes money when you enjoy a 2-cent cup of coffee and stay healthy. Plenty of people make money when you are anxious, when you are second-guessing, when you swap the free thing for the sold thing. And the fear does something else. It makes you dependent. An older person who trusts their own routine, their own kitchen, their own morning cup, is hard to sell to. An older person who has been taught to be afraid of ordinary things is a customer for life. That is the cost of not knowing. Not just the money, though the money adds up over years. It is the independence. It is the quiet confidence of knowing that something you have done every morning for 50 years is not your enemy. They took that from my sister with a single shrug, and she is one of millions. But even as I was piecing this together, I felt like I was missing something, because all these studies talked about how much coffee and what kind of coffee. 2 to 3 cups. Filtered, not boiled. That was useful. That was real. But something kept nagging at me, a thread I had not pulled yet. None of them, at first, seemed to talk about when. And that question, the question of timing, is where the whole investigation finally cracked open into something I had never heard anyone say out loud. I found it in a study published in the European Heart Journal in January of 2025. A research team led by Dr. Lu Chi at Tulane University did something almost nobody had done before. They did not just ask people how much coffee they drank. They asked when they drank it, morning only or all through the day. Then they followed those people, tens of thousands of adults, tracked using national health data in the United States, followed for years, cross-checked against records of who lived and who died and from what. The result is the thing I wish someone had handed my sister instead of that shrug. The people who drank their coffee in the morning, roughly before noon, had a meaningfully lower risk of dying during the study than people who drank no coffee at all. Their risk of dying from any cause was lower by about 16%, and their risk of dying specifically from heart disease was lower by around 31%. But the all-day drinkers, the people who sipped coffee morning, afternoon, and into the evening, did not get that same protection. The clear benefit belonged to the morning drinkers. Same amount of coffee in many cases, same bean. The difference was the clock. Let me say that plainly, because it is the whole secret at the end of this maze. It may not be only how much coffee you drink, or even only how you brew it. It may be when you drink it, front-loaded into the morning, and the pattern in this data lines up with a longer life and a healthier heart. Spread it across the whole day and into the evening, and that clean advantage fades. Now, why would that be? The researchers had a sensible idea, and it fits everything else I had found. Coffee late in the day disrupts your sleep, even when you do not feel it. Poor sleep drives inflammation and stresses the heart over time. Coffee also interacts with your body's natural daily rhythm, the internal clock that rises in the morning and winds down at night. Drinking coffee in the window when your body is already meant to be alert may work with that rhythm. Drinking it when your body is trying to power down may work against it. And here is what struck me most. Our grandparents did this without knowing why. Coffee was a morning thing, a breakfast thing. You had your cup or two in the early hours, and by afternoon you were on to other things. The all-day, giant cup, late-night coffee habit is a modern invention, built by an industry that wanted you buying cups at every hour. The old pattern, morning coffee, then done, turns out to line up almost exactly with what this 2025 study found protects the heart. That is the shape of this whole story, and it is the shape of nearly everything I dig up on this channel. The knowledge existed. Our grandparents lived it without a study to prove it. Then the modern world buried it under warnings and marketing and expensive alternatives. A few careful researchers in Norway and Massachusetts and New Orleans kept measuring and kept recording until the truth surfaced again in the data. I pulled it out, and now it belongs to you. So let me hand you the whole thing, clean and simple, the way I wish someone had handed it to my sister across that kitchen table. You do not have to quit coffee because you turned 70. For most older people, the research points the other way. Moderate coffee, around 2 to 3 cups a day, lines up with a lower risk of dying and a healthier heart, not a higher one. That is the message hiding inside the UK Biobank data and a dozen studies like it. Brew it through a paper filter. That thin sheet traps the oils, the caffeistol and kawiol, that raise your cholesterol. If you use a French press or a percolator or the old boiled method, you are letting those oils into your cup for no reason. Set a paper filter in the path of your coffee, and the problem largely disappears. That fix costs almost nothing, and you can do it with your very next pot. And drink it in the morning. Front-load your coffee into the early part of the day and ease off well before evening. That single change in timing is the piece almost nobody talks about, and it is the piece the newest research suggests may matter most for your heart and how long you live. None of this requires a purchase. None of it requires a specialist. None of it requires you to trust me over your own doctor. In fact, take this study to your doctor, the European Heart Journal, January of 2025, and ask them about it. Watch whether they knew. I keep thinking about how close my sister came to giving up something that was quietly on her side. One warning, no number behind it, and she almost surrendered a 50-year habit that the best modern evidence says she should keep, just brewed through paper, and finished by noon. Because there is a difference between the coffee your body handles and the coffee that works against it, and for years nobody bothered to tell us which was which. Somebody had to keep measuring, somebody had to write it down, and somebody had to go dig it back out from under all the fear. Let me leave you with the deeper thing this whole search gave back to me. It was not really about coffee. It was about trusting the plain, cheap, everyday things that have been with us all along, and refusing to be frightened off them by a warning that cannot show its work. You did not get to your age by being careless. You got here by paying attention. And paying attention means asking for the number behind the fear. You are the kind of person who wants the evidence, not the marketing. That is why you are still here at the end of this, while other people are off buying another bottle of something they do not need. You would rather understand the thing than be sold the thing. That instinct is worth more than any product on any shelf. So here is what I want to know from you. When you drink your coffee, is it morning only, or do you sip it all day long? And do you brew it through a paper filter, or with a French press or percolator? Tell me in the comments, because I read them, and I am genuinely curious how many of you were already doing the right thing without ever being told why. And tell me where you are watching from. I love seeing how far this reaches. If a plain cup of coffee had this much buried underneath it, imagine what else we have been talked out of. That is what we do here. We dig the old, useful knowledge back out from under the fear and the fees, together. Stay with me, because the next thing I went looking for surprised me even more. An ordinary kitchen staple our grandparents kept by the stove for a reason almost nobody remembers, and what I found about it made me question a product I had been buying for 30 years. Put the cup back in your hand, brew it through paper, drink it in the morning, and stop apologizing for the one small pleasure that turns out to have been on your side the whole time. Before you go, let me say one thing. This video gave you the overview, but the full method continues inside my membership, the Wise Living Circle, picking up right where we stopped. You can ask me your own questions, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be alone, you'll belong here. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen, and you can cancel anytime, no risk at all. Now, if coffee surprised you, wait until you hear the truth about eggs after 70. What you've believed for years may be wrong, and it could change how you feel each day. That video is starting right here.